And here we go. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And we'll hear the deans, got people joining us. I just ask that you put your mute, please. I'm going to have us here on the gallery view. If you've updated already, you'll be following the host view and you'll see our presenters on the top row on the top page. We've got about 4 pages. Don't feel obligated to have your on. It's not court, this is training, even though this is where I'm at. So you're welcome to turn off your video and just listen, multitask, if you will. We have Mr. Fuentes here, host, to kind of help me juggle the folks coming in from the waiting room and the chat messages, and also we'll be moderating any questions that you have presenters at the conclusion of the presentation. So I thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to give a few minutes for folks to connect to audio, make sure that you can hear as see us. So if you take a minute or two to get situated, we are at 12:03 and we'll get started with the presentation shortly, but you are in the right place. If you are here for the strategies on virtual jury trial, you are in the right place, and welcome. It is such a pleasure and it's such a joy to have so many of you here to hear the expertise from your peers, from your colleagues, and we are happy to have you all. For those of you who practiced, know that I am going to be putting myself on a timer. So I have 5 minutes of the presentation time, and our 5 attorneys are going to have 7 minutes. And then we're going to open it up for questions. So you're populate the chat to everyone with your questions. You're welcome to message Mr. Fuentes with your questions if you'd like to ask a question anonymously. But please send me the questions, because I've got to tell you, I may miss it and I don't want to do that to you. So if you have a question, go ahead and populate the chat to everyone. Go ahead and send Mr. Fuentes a message directly, or feel free at the end of the presentation to turn on your video and turn on your audio to the question. But until that portion of the presentation, I'm going to ask that you stay on mute, and we are ready to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mary Lou Alvarez. I'm your judge of the 45th District Court. You'll notice I am recording this training session. There are several people who have asked for the recording. If you are one of those people or you are friends with one of those people, please know that we are recording and it will be posted on the YouTube channel for the 45th District Court. As we stand, we have about 170 participants here with us today. Welcome and thank you for your interest. And we are capped at 300. I don't think we're going to get there, but if by chance throughout the course of this presentation you hear from folks that weren't able to get in, please send them my apologies and let them know that it will be recorded and posted no later than Monday, February 1st. For those of you who have practiced before, you know that I sometimes use a timer. I will be using it not just for the presenters, but also for myself. I've got 5 minutes to kind of introduce you to this training. We want to make sure that everyone has the expertise that these attorneys have developed for the virtual jury trial. Before you and who will be presenting before you today are Ms. Erica Bryant, Mr. Jeffrey Martinez, Mr. Manuel Rodriguez, Ms. Alana Pearsall, and Ms. Wingate Hernandez. They tried a 2-week into the 3rd week trial virtually. There were 5 parties in the case, 18 witnesses, 46 exhibits, and the jury deliberated over the course of 2 days. As far as knowledge base goes and expertise developing goes, these 5 attorneys have got what you want to know. And so I'm going to give them an opportunity to speak, each one in turn. I do want to let you know that the virtual jury trial consists of Judges Arteaga, Stryker, Alvarado, Jimenez, CHAPA. And I want you to know that we have all been working very hard to make sure that this virtual jury trial experience is appropriate and is able to keep our wheels of justice turning. And we've been working at this since May of last year, maybe April, just after the operations plan got implemented for our civil district presiding court. So that our jurists, our judges are very much committed to ensure that interest is preserved and moves forward in the times of COVID. As you all may know, in August of 2020, there was a pilot virtual jury trial program that we implemented. At that time, almost 6 months ago, consent of the parties was required to do the virtual jury trial. We are not in pilot program mode anymore. That was in August of 2020. Now, consent is not required. If for whatever reason you want to file a motion for continuance on a trial setting that you have upcoming, file your notice, file a motion, set it for a hearing so that it can be adjudicated. Please don't feel that just because you're going to get a jury trial setting that is a virtual jury trial setting, that there will be an automatic continuance. There is not a pilot program going on anymore. We are giving assignments. As of today, 4 cases have been assigned thus far for virtual jury trial. 3 of them have gone and come back to verdict. For February 1st, 2020, we have 3 cases assigned for a virtual jury trial. With the February 1st jury trial assignments, half of our judiciary will have either presided over or co-judged a virtual jury trial. So it would be the virtual jury trial committee as well as Continuances will have the expertise developing, as we all are developing the expertise, to preside over the virtual jury trial cases. So please know that that is being done and we are moving forward. And so we want you to be ready for the virtual jury trials. We want you to make sure that you know that these assignments are happening, that these assignments may happen to you. And so with that, I want to give you the time and space to ask questions after you receive the expertise that has been developed by the litigators that are before you. I have 10 seconds to spare, so I'm going to stop the timer and turn the stage over to Miss Erica Bryant. Very much.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, everybody. So some of the few things that I learned from the Zoom trial was in witness preparation. So for the most part, all parties will usually invoke the rule. So it's important to let the judge or whoever the judge assigns to allow the people into the virtual courtroom know who your next witness is, because there may be observers who are let in during the trial, during testimony, and you want to make sure that your witness is not allowed in during somebody else's testimony if they happen to be on standby or if they happen to dial into the Zoom. Make sure the court is aware of your witness list and who will be your next witness that should be left in the waiting room and not allowed in. Another important thing is lighting and background. We learned from some of the jurors that part of our presentation and cutting in and out with audio, or if our sounded cut off, could be if you have a virtual background, it may cause a lag in your presentation from them listening to what you're saying. It's also important to have an extra device. You may not think there's issues with your internet, but it happened to so many people during the trial. You want to have a cell phone or another device nearby that you're able to log on to in case one device is not working. And be sure to look at the time. Look at the time you get logged off, because if you're on the record, you're going to have to go back and let the court know when, what you last heard. And for the most part, you're listening to what's going on, but you don't always remember what the last thing that was said, because you're caught up in trying to get logged back on. And so if you look at what time you logged off, it's helpful for the court and the court reporter to go back and track the time to determine uh, better time where you left off, or where whoever left off last heard something. And in that point, when a juror or somebody involved in the case is logged off and we're trying to read back the record, it's also important for you to, if it's during your direct or cross-examination, important for you to keep good notes as to where you left off, because sometimes those technical issues could take 5, 10, 15 minutes by the time you get the juror back on or the party back on, you have the record read back. And so it's very easy to lose track of where you're at. Typically, when you're in an in-person jury trial, you don't have that type of distraction or that type of cutoff in the middle of your questioning. And it's very likely to happen when you are questioning your witnesses, where right in the middle of it, or even in your opening statements, your closing arguments, um, it's likely to happen at any point. So just keep good notes, keep good track of where you are, because you're going to have to start right back up in who knows how long the technical difficulties could last. And another important thing is, when you're doing your questioning, if you decide to display any exhibits, or if the judge makes you a co-host during the time that you're doing your examination. um, Prior to the jury trial, I had never hosted or been a co-host on any Zoom, so I wasn't aware that when individuals are trying to get into the meeting, there's a lot of pop-ups and dingings and sounds during that the host is getting. And so as a co-host, when you're doing your direct examination or you're trying to show exhibits, there's constant dinging going on and it could be a distraction. So if you're aware of it, it's less of a distraction because you kind of know it's going to happen, and then you're able to just proceed with your questioning. Um, so I think that's also very important to be aware of. Um, it was extremely helpful, and I think those who are going to be or are already assigned to have a virtual jury trial, in our case, we had pretrial hearings almost daily, and it was extremely helpful in not having the jury move out or having us go to a different room. Like when you're in court, we didn't have running objections. We had all of our exhibits pre-admitted. And so even though it lasted 2 weeks, not having had done that, it would have lasted longer. It's not like in the courtroom where, you can go up to the bench, and you can't really do that on the Zoom. And in having to do stuff outside the presence of the jury, it's having to move either the parties and the attorneys to different rooms and bringing them back into new rooms. And so that's also a distraction, which Judge Alvarez did great in having that not really happen, or it didn't happen at all, if I can recall correctly. And it was good for the jury because we didn't waste a lot of their time, even though we did have them for a little over 2 weeks. So it's important to be able to address everything um, pre-trial. And I'll pass the rest of my time. Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Bryant. And I'm actually going to take the last minute of your presentation because I forgot to make 2 announcements that I intended to make with my opening. Please, 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 if you have not done so, update your Zoom. When you get the latest version of Zoom, you will get 49 boxes in one page. And so when you're doing a voir dire, a panel of 40, a panel of 60, or as in this case, they voir dired a panel of 57, you will need to have the updated version of Zoom. Also, you will be able to follow the host view. So when the judge rearranges the panel members in order, or during the trial, rearranges the jury in order, you will get that host view if you have the updated version of Zoom. Also, please make sure to check your emails. Once you get that email from Ms. Dossman that you've got a trial setting coming up, make sure that you are in communication with her and in communication with the judge that you are assigned to. We are trying very, very hard to make sure that we are sending out letters, expectations, pretrial conference settings and times as soon as we get the assignments. So please make sure, update your Zoom and don't let your email traffic get stale. So with that, Mr. Martinez, I've got the timer for 7 minutes, sir. If you would please do us the pleasure of sharing your expertise and tips.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jeffrey Martinez. I think the most important thing to take away is that this is going forward. I know in November, we were with Judge Sakai, and he put us on the monitoring for January 4th. And I thought, no way are we going forward with a jury trial on Zoom on January 4th. He also ordered us to mediation. We did mediation in December. I thought there's no way we're going to trial January 4th. December 30th, we had a pretrial conference informally with Judge Alvarez. I still thought there's no way we're going to Zoom trial next week. We had a motion to withdraw as counsel over the weekend before January 4th. I thought there's no way we're going forward. But January 4th, the jury pool was there. Judge Alvarez went through them. They were selected on that morning of January 4th. The afternoon of January 4th, I think there was a question there. We went through everyone's exhibits that were due the morning of January 4th. On that Monday at 8 a.m., we had a shared Gmail folder where all attorneys had to file their exhibits, file all their pleadings. Every party had their own folder where those were due at 8 in the morning on January 4th. And the afternoon of January 4th, we went through those objections. We went through those. I'll let Mr. Rodriguez talk more about exhibits and sharing the screens with exhibits. But that was the day of January 4th. Then when we went to day 2, that's when our jury selection began. I was very impressed by the technology that all the jurors had, just like we are in here right now. Expect the same out of the jurors, whether or not they are bored because of COVID, they want to do their civic duty. They were there and they were very much ready to participate. I really was impressed so much by how engaged they were the entire time during jury selection. I believe it's even better to do jury selection during Zoom. I don't want to sound like a homer, but I think it's because these people are in their own home. They felt more able to raise their hand when they wanted to talk about a sensitive topic that maybe they wouldn't be able to talk about around everybody in a courtroom, or maybe they just would be too shy to raise their hand in a courtroom. And then once you got them talking, they really felt like they're in their own home and it just came out. So it really helped with minimizing challenges for strikes or for calls, I'm sorry, but people's prejudices and personalities really came out and they weren't shy. Going on about those pretrial, we did them almost every day. So even on day 1 or day 2, really, after, everyone had an hour to do general and specific during jury selection process. And even every day when we come back from lunch, we would need to meet as a group to either address something that had come up, whether that was a hiccup with one juror's technology. I think during the 57 jurors, out of the 3-day process that it took us to pick a jury, there was only one that we lost. Well, 2 that we lost. One that we lost from the get-go, and then by day 3, a juror didn't come back. So we were always able to address those things either after lunch or before at 8 in the morning. But out of the 57 jurors that we started with in our pool, only lost 2 for technology or just for lack of coming back in some of those cases. It was always, it's much easier even to connect with them, the jury pool, because of the jokes you could talk to them about, how comfortable they were, either not wearing shoes or just being in their own home. Day 2 almost finished with we did where all parties were able to go through, and we began challenges for strikes on day 2. That continued through day 3. It was very easy once we did that on day 3. All the jury pool was able to go onto a breakout room, where I'm sure everybody has experienced that. And then we were able to bring individuals one at a time. Just so you know, when you're thinking about your in-person jury trials compared to Zoom, I say double your time. You know, those in the Zoom challenges, you know, it just takes double. Anything you think can have a hiccup on Zoom, it's going to happen. Whether a jury member needs to go answer the door, put their cat away or their animal, we have to take more breaks to allow them to have that ability to not get frustrated. I think each individual judge is going to have some consideration for how we do that. We didn't have any time limit on specific, not on specific, but on challenges for cause. And there were a lot, because I think people were able to talk a little bit more. I know something that they told me, I'm habitually talk fast. You have to deliberately talk a little bit slower, because you have to anticipate your internet's going to get slow. I saw it many different times where my internet connection got fuzzy on my own computer, and just know that besides needing to go slow, the internet is going to get you many, many times. I think that's all that I really had. Oh, just that whenever you are doing your own jury, when you have your own hour, you can have a co-counsel, just like there's so many of us in here. Ms. Wingate Hernandez had a co-counsel. You're gonna have 49, 57 people, maybe 20 of them are gonna raise their hand on a question. It helps when someone else is calling out the numbers, just like if you would have a co-counsel at table, and then you can write them down. So you can have a co-counsel during that, do that. And then what really was helpful was that they're going to be in order. What was really great is, because of this time frame, you're going to get the jury questions that they answer and their information hopefully the night before. I know that was one of the benefits we had, was so after day 1, we got the PDFs that we were able to go through all 57 jurors to make it much easier. We don't just have that hour the next day or the day of. And then when we were actually performing, everybody's in order, 1 through 57. So when they're raising their hand, you can go back and hit them and make sure you're doing that. Judge, I'm not sure where I am on my time. I know those are all my hints that I had.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. And it was perfectly timed. The ringer just went off. So thank you for your expertise. And I do see that we are getting questions in the chat. So thank you for those questions. Keep them coming. We will address them at the end of the presentations. And the deputy of the 45th, Deputy Herrera, is also here if there are questions about the deliberations. He has done me the favor of being available to answer those questions as well. So without further ado, Mr. Rodriguez, if you would do us the pleasure of sharing your expertise, sir, I'm starting the timer.
Thank you very much, Judge. Good afternoon. This is Manny Rodriguez. I've been looking at the chat questions, and they're all very good questions. In fact, a lot of them the same questions I had before we got started. My experience was colored by the fact that I was my client's 6th appointed lawyer. So that gives you an idea of my experience. And with that, the biggest issue, certainly from my client's perspective, was communication with me during the trial. I am quite certain that if we were having a normal jury trial, he would have been in my ear constantly, or once I got angry about that, sending me messages constantly about questions I should be asking and things I was doing wrong. So that was a difficulty, and having to talk to him before court, after court, dealing with his issues was a constant struggle. And I don't know how to deal with that any better than just do the best you can. So as you noticed with, I think I saw the chat that the judge's audio was going in and out as she was starting her presentation. I think that was because of the dings of people joining. I'm a big believer in the headphones and the microphone. I have a microphone that I use I think that's helpful to cut out any of that happening on your end, because you certainly don't want anything to inhibit your presentation at any point in the trial. I want to definitely make a point about witness preparation. Never is it more important for witness preparation than this virtual jury trial. You need to have a practice session with your witnesses to make sure their setup works, they can be heard, their background is good, what they're wearing, because they're going to be at home and comfortable. And very importantly, that they wait to answer their question so there's time for objections. Because of the delay, I think, in the audio with Zoom, it was very difficult to get an objection in before the answer started. And the judge was quick to remind us, sorry, counsel, too late, it's in. And that was very frustrating to deal with. And constant reminders to your witnesses to take that breath before they answer is just very critical, in my opinion. The exhibits. Judge Alvarez was very good about handling all the exhibit issues as ahead of time as much as possible. And that very much streamlined the trial. Are there going to be issues that are going to come up with things that aren't agreed to? Of course. But that's why having pre-trials every day, I think, is useful potentially, just to check in a half hour before you start to get as much witness time, jury time as possible is your goal. So you're not tripling the time of your jury trial that you expected ahead of time. With jury selection, so in person, of course, you have that feeling. You can feel the mood of the room, and as you're moving the same question to the next juror, because you can see their reaction, or you can see that feel is lost in the virtual world. I think having large screens helps. I have multiple screens that very much help. I have 3 screens. I have a desktop computer with fairly large monitors. That's useful. I know some attorneys have TV screens. So the larger the box, I think, the better. So you can look at the human being, look at the individual and how they're reacting. And you need help to have eyes on the jurors, right? To see their reactions, because you have so many screens, and you may, if you can, I'm limited to 49. I don't know if there's a way to have them all at the same time. Probably if you had a partner, they could do that. I did not have that luxury. I wish I would have. I think that would have been useful. And also in the same regard, during the trial, you could have a juror get dropped off the Zoom call and boom, they disappeared. And if nobody catches it, by the time they come back, the only way to fix it is to read back the transcript. The court reporter, in my opinion, is really the star of the show in these trials, because that court reporter now has to read back the transcript of the witness testimony to that juror that's missing from the point that the juror thinks that they dropped off. In our case, Judge Alvarez was, I could tell, constantly looking at her screen at our 12 jurors. Well, we had 3 alternates at our 15 jurors to make sure that they were all there all the time. And I think the longest anyone was missing was probably 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It really turned out to be not so bad. Let's see, what else? The sensitive topic stuff that Jeffrey mentioned. I, in my experience, had never had so many jurors talk about sensitive topics freely as they had in our jury selection. And it had to be because they're at home and not shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of strangers. Doing these CPS cases, we only ask personal questions during jury selection to get to know what their reaction to those things. So that was surprising to me. That was surprising. Let's see. With the share screen. So like as I mentioned, I have 3 monitors, and that was very useful with my witness questioning and having my exhibits ready to show on my share screen, where I knew this screen I'm sharing. So I'm not accidentally doing an oops and showing things I didn't want to show. So having a screen dedicated to as your share screen, I think is just super important. And that saved me. One time I thought I had messed that up and I went into a panic and started closing all my screens because I was afraid I was showing something I didn't want to show. So that's the last thing I have, Judge. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. And you were just right there on the bell. So I thank you all for your commitment to the 7 minutes. And Ms. Pearsall, if you would please do us the pleasure of sharing your expertise, ma'am. I am starting the timer.
Thank you, Honor, very much for having this. I guess I'd like to start by saying that our clients really want their day in court. I know in this case, I really wanted this jury trial. I pushed for it. I was the one that got everybody else stuck in this virtual world and got the order from Judge Sakai that there'll be no continuances for any reason absent, some catastrophe. And I think that all of our clients deserve it. I also think we have a lot of opposing counsel that are now using this jury demand as a way to get out of ever going to trial. So I think we all need to figure out how to do this so we can protect our clients and we can get them justice and we can get them their day in court. The one really cool thing about Bexar County that I think most of us do not know, I didn't know that before this jury trial started, is Bexar County has iPads, and they're iPads with hotspots that they will loan out to every juror, every witness, every party, every lawyer. They are free. They will take care of any technical, limitations that the juries or the parties or the witnesses have. And that's really cool. So for anybody who's afraid that their client just, can't figure out how to work it, or, their witnesses, don't have the capacity, Bexar County has a really cool system set up. It's no charge, and they will make sure everyone has it. I agree with what was kind of hinted on and talked about by all of my colleagues. Definitely expect the unexpected in this virtual world. We had attorneys who in the middle of the jury trial, CPS came outside their house and cut their electricity. The roof in my building decided to be replaced in the middle of my closing argument. We had jurors who had knocks on the door, whose dinner was burning, whose iPads died. And it's okay, we dealt with all of those, but just sort of expect the unexpected. There were strange reasons. We paused and then had to come back, and we survived and moved on. But that definitely happens, and I just think it's things you sort of need to expect in a virtual jury trial that you're not going to expect, that aren't going to happen when we're doing them in person. I also agree with Mr. Rodriguez that we had a court reporter who was taking a record in real time, and that was amazing. And honestly, I don't know how you can do a virtual jury trial unless you have a court reporter in real time. Because when someone dropped off, we all were watching, the jurors were watching, the judge was watching, and we very accurately could say, okay, they dropped off at 12:32. And our court reporter read it back, and we got right back on and continued with the trial. And that was amazing and avoided, in my opinion, any appellate errors, and everybody, continued on and stayed on and heard everything. So that was amazingly helpful. When we are getting ready for any jury trial, I think we all as attorneys bring someone to help us, whether that's another attorney or our assistant. I think virtual jury trial should be done exactly the same way, especially for voir dire. You definitely need to update your Zoom and have the latest update. That allows you to have up to 49 windows in your screen. When you have a large jury pool, we had 55. That was helpful. What I personally did, I actually liked the bigger screens. And so I had 3 different screens in my office that were being watched by 3 different people. And one of my screens was 60 inches, and another one was 55. And I have never seen juror faces that clearly in any of my jury trials before. And we could truly judge their emotion. We all were taking notes. I knew every juror that squinted, made a face, smiled at anything we said. I don't think I've ever picked a jury as well as I did in this trial, because we could really see that. And I think there is this concern that because we're in the virtual world, well, how do you know what they're feeling? How do you know what they're thinking? You don't really connect. I actually think it was exactly the opposite. We saw them so well, and we could judge all of their reactions. And we've had I think we struck something like 15 jurors for cause. I don't know the exact number, because I agree. They were really comfortable. They were really honest. When we questioned them one-on-one, it was in the breakout room. And so there was no concern of anybody else maybe hearing something from the back or them being embarrassed. We got amazing amount of embarrassing, honest answers. And I think that helped us pick an amazing jury that truly, could judge the facts, not on their own prejudices. In this case, they had a lot of prejudices. We had homosexual issues, we had termination of parental rights issues, we had drugs, we had mental health. This case had a lot of really sensitive issues. And I was really impressed with the jury and their honesty. Pre-admission exhibits, that was wonderful. It was very helpful. It streamlined the process. I'm a big believer in doing that in non-jury and jury trials. And, I agree that if those exhibits weren't pre-admitted, I think this jury trial would have taken extra weeks. So I definitely think if you can work that out with the judge and with opposing counsel, you should do that. Next, I'd like to talk about Zoom advantages. We all have these fears of Zoom. We're lawyers. Most of us don't like technology. And 11 months ago, I think we were all petrified of this crazy new system called Zoom. But we all know how it works now. We've all been using it 5 days a week at least for about 11 months. And honestly, Zoom in a jury trial is no different than Zoom in any other trial. And it has so many cool things we can't do in real life. We have witnesses from other countries that we can get that cost nothing that can appear. We have really unfriendly witnesses who truly can't argue with us because of that time lapse that Mr. Rodriguez mentioned. That's really helpful. You actually get to ask your question and they get to be silent. So there is none of that interruption, which I think helps definitely court reporters, but also just the smoothness of the trial. Exhibits are really, really cool. You can do things on Zoom you cannot do in real life. We can share exhibits. We can blow them up. We can underline and highlight things and point out what the jury gets to see. And while we are sharing the screen, they have no choice but to actually look at our exhibit. There is nothing else they can look at. I know Mr. Rodriguez had some interesting exhibits because he had an interesting client. And so I had really a lot of fun using his client's exhibits and saying, jury, please read this. I had at one point his client read, yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, especially when you're talking about advantages, but I do want to make sure that we get to the next speaker. And I'm sure you're going to get peppered with a lot of questions. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Absolutely, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Wingate Hernandez, again, certainly last but not least, if you would please do us the honor of sharing your expertise with us. I will start the timer now.
Thank you, Judge. As she said, last but not least, the judge addressed me that way every day that we were in trial because she did put me last. I was the representative of the children. So we got to hear both sides and the state every day before I had to say anything, which was to me very, very helpful. I got to pick up the pieces and the scraps at the end, and that was very helpful to kind of keep things on a flow, to reduce the numbers of questions because I did not need to duplicate things that had already been asked by both sides. And so we were able to move along. But Alana brought up something very important. She said nothing else they can look at. They were instructed not to have anything else to look at. One of the things that happened while we were having this trial was that horrible Wednesday where the Capitol was attacked occurred amidst our jury trial. And I have to say, I was overwhelmed by the fact that that was happening. I found out from my telephone, which was beside my monitor. I thought surely the jury was going to be totally distracted and not paying attention because it was so traumatic. But fortunately, the judge had instructed them and they had been obedient. They had had their phones off or were not paying attention to them. And even at the end, when we pulled the jury and we spoke to them afterwards, they told us that they did not pay attention to that and that they were paying attention to the hearing. And it was evident that they really were dedicated to follow the court's instructions. Not to brown nose the judge, but I do think it's important that I make some comments about Judge Judge Alvarez, and that was that every day she reminded the jury how important their role was and what we were doing, and how they were essentially the first trial of this style on Zoom, and how what they chose to do and how they chose to comport themselves during this process was going to be key to figuring out how effective it may or may not be. I believe her endorsement of this jury and reminding them of how important their duties were helped them to be on spot and on key every single day. One of the things I found very effective, which I know we do in the courtroom, was to call out the jurors by their jury number and address them independently, because we have these 49 different little windows that we can look at. You can call their name, you can see them respond to you in the screen, and they see you and you see them and you see them face to face. You're not looking at the side of their head, and you're not looking at 12 faces jammed up behind a bar. You're looking at each of them in their individual pictures. You're in their house. Because you are in their house, I do believe, as Mr. Martinez and Mr. Rodriguez have both said, and Alana as well, that they seem to be much more open and attuned and independent and willing to speak because they're in their personal environments. That being said, you have to call them by their number, and you need to let them know that you are seeing them to catch them and alert them that that's what's happening. And once again, Judge Alvarez also brought them on and asked them and empowered them and said, if you see one of your colleagues, they're disappearing off the screen or they go black or whatever, immediately raise your hand and let us know so that we can stop. And by the jury being empowered to participate in that way, we seem to get them to be much more attuned. And several of them were very active in saying, okay, looks like that one's gone out, or this one's gone out, or there's been a distraction. And they've all stepped up and participated in the process. Very important that you have a backup device. My office is where the city decided to turn off the power in the midst of this process, and it was terribly frightening to me. Fortunately, I have an iPad that was battery charged because all of the power went out, so it wouldn't have helped to just have another computer. You need to have a separate device that is battery charged in case something happens. And if something can happen, something will happen. And we were able to continue. I don't think I was out for more than 3 minutes between changing from my desktop to my iPad to be able to go through the process. I also happen to have wonderful backup. If y'all don't know Mark Unger and you haven't used Mark Unger in the past and you are fearful of Zoom or fearful of this process, be sure you get a hold of him. He can help you tremendously. He helped me tremendously. He made it possible for all of my documents to be moved the way they needed to, made sure that all of my technology was functioning for me, and was very, very helpful in the jury selection process by being able to do exactly what Alana said, focus on the individual faces and be able to give responses to those faces. That was very, very helpful. I guess essentially, if you judge telling us to update our Zoom, we thought we'd updated, didn't realize, plugged around and got that done. The updating of your Zoom is critically important. Play with it if you haven't done it yet, and have confidence about that process. There are 5 attorneys sitting here in front of you, and I guess you can't imagine which one of us enjoyed this Zoom and which one didn't, but I will tell you, even those who were not convinced that it was going to work, I think we've all had a little bit of a change of opinion about whether or not this works. I believe the jury was fully engaged. We found out after it was all over that the jury was very much engaged and very much willing to participate. I think they were more willing to do it here because they didn't have to drive downtown. They didn't have to pay for parking, and they were able to stay in the comfort of their own home. They were incredibly dedicated, and I encourage you to participate in this jury process in this fashion. I think it's what we're going to have to do, and I think we all need to stay safe and protect the jurors. And Judge, thank you. I'll give you back whatever time you need left.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for that minute, and I will go ahead and take it. I'm going to ask Mr. Fuentes to go ahead and start getting the questions in the chat organized somewhat, and we'll pose a question to each attorney in the order that they present. And then if any other attorney would like to chime in, you may. Some of the questions have already been answered with regards to what happens if jurors fall off or have tech issues. We did have that happen. I'm not going to say that it was flawless because, you know, nothing is flawless, but that's litigation. You don't get a flawless jury trial even in person. And so I don't want you to be concerned, overly concerned that those hiccups will happen. We all adjusted. And I do agree that having a court reporter who is able to do real time remotely is essential, because you will have technical issues. You will have connections to audio that fall out or jurors that fall out, and you will be able to use the real time record, the court and the court reporter, to pinpoint the exact question where that drop off happened. And you can recreate it and move on. So I think we've answered those questions. I know that was a big question of concern about what happens if the jurors or attorneys, litigants, witnesses fall off. We just adjust. And that's what we would do in the courtroom if we were all together. We would just adjust and keep moving forward. So with that, the question about video connection or audio connection or both for witnesses, I will tell you that I require the video to be on. I'm not going to have a witness that I can't see and swear in. And if they're providing testimony to the jurors, who all have to have their cameras on, along with the litigants and the attorneys, then the witness providing that testimony and that evidence shall have their video on as well as their audio. So do we have the first question, Mr. Fuentes?
We do. We have one anonymous question, and it's for each of the panelists. It says, for each of the panelists, can you tell us what was involved prior to the actual trial in terms of in-person meetings with clients, experts, staff to prepare for the trial, etc.? I want to get a better sense of the in-person risk of exposure required behind the scenes for a trial versus a deposition.
All right, Ms. Bryant.
I did not meet with anybody in person. Everything I did was over the phone, email, all of my exhibits with my experts, police officers, lay witnesses, caseworkers. I had all of my witnesses, all of my exhibits pre-marked, state's exhibit, whatever number it was. With my police officer, I didn't admit his exhibit, so I just made sure he had a copy of it to refresh his memory. The same thing with the witnesses that I was entering exhibits that were not pre-admitted. I made sure to send them the exhibit with the number so I can ask all of the questions and refer to the exhibit with them as if I was showing them on the stand, but not showing it to the jury until I admitted it. So I didn't have to talk to anybody in person or meet anybody in person.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez?
For me, it was the same. This is a CPS case, so there weren't any depositions, but because of that, the good thing, we get the CPS DID file, which has everything that's ever been associated with these parents. So that tremendously helped. I met with my client over the phone, in Zoom, with her witnesses, and was able to do everything virtually as well.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
Same for me. Like I said, my experience was just having my client participate in everything I was doing, and his witnesses that he was recommended, of course, I was careful to vet them because of their backgrounds and whether they would hurt my client or not. I had to cut some of them out and have that conversation with my client. But you know, being with him on the pre-admitting the exhibits and having that conversation completely squared away ahead of time was critical.
Thank you. Ms. Pearsall?
I've met no one since March, and I'm not going to. So this was all done virtual. I've actually never met my two clients in the case in person. So it was all done virtual. Now, there was one exception to that, and that's during Fort Dyer. So one of the people helping me was my husband, who lives with me. So I recruited him and told him he had to quit his day job and help me with Fort Dyer, which he kindly did. And then my paralegal, who is working full time, was the other person helping me, but it wasn't in person. we were sort of screaming at each other and texting each other, was that. So there was no human interaction involved and none was needed. I think all of the attorneys did a really good job and we didn't lose anything from lack of human contact.
All right, thank you. Ms. Wingate Hernandez?
My last human contact with my clients was in February of 2020, and they are 2 and 4. And so we played then, but since then, their caregivers allowed me to Zoom them. So outside of that, Zoom has been all the contact I've had with anyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you have any other anonymous questions time-stamped before the ones that we have in the chat, Mr. Fuentes?
Yes, we have one more. Of the virtual jury trials that have already taken place, were the proceedings live streamed on YouTube or broadcast publicly in some other way? If so, were any portions such as individual questioning of a veneer person or bench conferences exempted from being live streamed?
I can go ahead and answer that question. So we've had Judge Arteaga, Judge Jimenez, myself, as well as the co-judges of Judge Stryker, Judge Chapa, and that's what's happened so far, I believe. There has not been any live stream of the virtual jury trials onto YouTube. What we have done for public access is the judge has let in observers to the Zoom courtroom directly upon request, and we also have it streaming into the co-judge's courtroom. So for example, when Judge Arteaga presided over the first virtual jury trial in Bexar County in November, that proceeding was streamed into Judge Jimenez's courtroom. When Judge Jimenez had her virtual jury trial, that proceeding was streamed into the 45th courtroom. And when we did ours, our proceeding was streamed into Judge Stryker's courtroom. So we are doing streaming, but it's here at the courthouse. Upon request, you may actually come into the courtroom to observe, and I suspect that that may be the practice going forward. For next week, I will be presiding over a virtual jury trial, as will Judge Chapa. Judge Canales will be co-judging Judge Chapa's trial. Judge Alvarado will be co-judging my trial that begins on Monday, February 1st. Going to the chat, the public chat to everyone, there's a lot of questions collectively about exhibits, demonstrative exhibits, not pre-admitted. Since we're running out of time, if I'm going to take a stab at that and then ask our attorneys to chime in, we did a lot of pre-admitted and we had the opportunity to do so. There was a separate virtual courtroom created that the attorneys and I would get to meet either before at the 8:30 to 9:30 window, juggling with the assisting presiding, or a shortened lunch break. And don't alarm, the lunch break never went below an hour, I believe. But we would meet in a separate courtroom so the jurors could come into the virtual courtroom and be arranged and be renamed by court staff. So the court clerk and the deputy would be in the virtual jury trial courtroom where the jurors were coming in. And so we had an opportunity to pre-admit exhibits. There were 2 exhibits, if I recall correctly, that were not pre-admitted, but that were admitted during witness testimony once the predicate had been laid. And that was done just the way you would do it in person. With regards to showing the screen of exhibits or demonstratives during examination of witnesses that have been pre-admitted, I think you need to work that out directly with your trial judge. I think all of us are going to have different practices. The practice in the 45th is that you're not sharing the screen with the bench or especially with the jury on things that are not admitted. Of course, there were demonstratives during opening and I believe during closing. And I think that needs to be taken up on a case-by-case basis once your trial is assigned to the trial judge. So I don't know, Ms. Bryant, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Rodriguez, Ms. Pearsall, Ms. Wingate Hernandez, I'll just open up the stage. If you have anything to add on exhibits.
On exhibits, no, Your Honor, but I did read through some of the questions. I wouldn't mind hitting. I know the chat is on now. That's something that was not on during our trial. The jurors did not have the ability to use that to talk to each other. I know there are some questions about the jurors themselves. Their video was on the entire time like ours was. They policed each other. If anyone ever got sleepy, their eyes were always front and center. So we knew they were never on a phone. They could have been on another screen, like we all have practice in Zoom and being doing emails, but we never saw any hands moving. They were so engaged. It was so impressive. I think the one tip I would make sure to mention is just like we're in real life, whether it's a witness or my client was guilty of it, is speaking when you're not on mute. Whether that's the badmouth co-counsel or the judge, that comes into the jury. So you have to make sure you tell your clients and your witnesses, to watch that mute button. And then for me personally, for everybody, practice sharing your screen. It takes a little bit to get out of it, to exit the sharing screen. And then those highlighting things are just so valuable to use. That's the questions I saw. So thank you, Your Honor.
I would just suggest that if exhibits are not pre-admitted or something that hasn't been admitted, make sure you email it to your witness how you are attempting to admit it into evidence with the exhibit number, all of the documents, and go through it with them so you can lay your predicate and refer to the exhibit by number for the record. And your witness will know what exhibit number you're talking about if you're doing multiple exhibits through one witness. And then you can, once it's admitted, show it to the jury.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, any questions in the chat that you'd like to take a stab at, or any closing thoughts that you'd like to share? We are at 12:57, so about a minute.
The only thing I have to add that I found useful is I paid for the full, in the past, I've had the full version of Adobe I do a lot of appellate work. And that was really useful with manipulating the exhibits when I was showing the jury. I had a lot of options. I could have done more. I probably should have done more. But the ability to highlight things and manipulate what you're showing to the jury, I think is effective and useful.
Thank you. Ms. Pearsall, any questions in the chat that you'd like to take a stab at, or any closing remarks?
I think a lot of people are concerned about whether the jurors are paying attention and what kind of jurors we get. And I was really impressed with the diversity of our jurors. We had young, old, retired, everything in between. We had highly educated jurors and those who obviously dropped out of high school and played video games for a living. We truly had the entire spectrum, and they all participated, and the level at which they paid attention was truly amazing. They clearly were taking notes. They were clearly leaning in when we were showing exhibits. I was really, really impressed with the amount of attention they paid. And like Ms. Wingate Hernandez mentioned earlier, attack on the Capitol happened during our jury trial. And I can tell you the lawyers were texting each other and wanting to know what happened. We asked the jurors at the end, and every one of them said they had no idea it even happened till that night. So they really listened. And I know Judge Alvarez kept driving it home at every break, at every recess, at every night, but they really listened. None of them had any idea even something that huge was going on. So I think for all of us who were concerned that this might be an issue in our jury trial, it definitely wasn't. And then the last thing I'd like to say, I know this is new, I know this is scary, but guys, there is nothing more fun than a virtual jury trial. You can go to jury, you can try your case, you can be a lawyer, and you can wear sweatpants the entire time you're doing it. This is the best we're ever going to be able to practice law. So try it. It's really worth it.
Thank you, Ms. Pearsall. Ms. Wingate Hernandez, if you would take a stroll through the chats, the questions that are remaining, any response to them or any closing remarks?
I think Mark said that if you'll check with the bar, there's a lot of other CLEs coming up. If you need to work on the technicalities of your sharing of your documents and things like that, the bar is sponsoring things that will help you with that. Practice your Zoom. But just personally, check your space, listen to your space. If you're going to get on a Zoom jury trial, your phone dings, your regular phone rings, the dog barks, the cat barks. Pay attention to those things, solve those problems so they don't unnerve you, because it is disturbing when those kinds of things happen, and things are going to happen. But if you're ready for it, you're not thrown off and you'll be great. I think it's a lot of fun. A lot of things is more fun than I do, but I definitely think it's more fun than Erica does. but we've had a great time, and good luck. And the judges are very generous. I know that they want us to succeed, and I know our clients want to do this. So everyone needs to just be careful and stay safe. It's been good to be able to stay home and not be sick. I've had family in the hospital with it, and it's been a very scary thing to watch our judges' families go through it. So let's all stay safe, but let's just let justice move forward, and let's do this. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm sorry that we didn't get to answer all of the questions. I do want to keep us on our time, and we are at 1:01. Some of the questions that have been posed, we're not going to have answers to. There's one question particularly intriguing about whether or not the jurors seeing each other face first on the Zoom was communication about the weight of the evidence prior to deliberation. I mean, what a wonderful law school exam question. That negates the fact that our jurors see each other and saw each other when they were in person just the same. And so I guess the extrapolation of that question could have been posed just in-person jury trials, unless we had our jurors in blinders, and we didn't. So, you know, there's a lot of novelty here, and I appreciate that. But these cases need to move forward. And so with the question regarding what was the makeup of the virtual jury trial cases that have been tried in this setting thus far, there were 3 personal injury cases, and this was the first family case. It was a parental rights termination. I believe the 3 personal injury thus far have been car accidents. The cases that are set for next week, I think there are 2 civil cases and 1 family case. That family case will be a divorce. So we're getting a myriad of our civil jurisdiction cases getting called for trial. And if you're called for trial and you get an email from Ms. Dossman asking for your trial announcement and all the things that you would have been providing pre-COVID, respond to it. If you have a motion for continuance that you want to make, draft it, file it, and set it. This is not litigation by email. We're not in the pilot program of August 2020 where we require your consent for a virtual jury trial. You are getting assigned. So hopefully this has helped with that preparation. Of course, we're open for questions, and I suspect that we will be having more of these training sessions in the weeks to come. Thank you all so much for your attendance and for your interest. And thank you to our panelists, Ms. Bryant, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Rodriguez, Ms. Pearsall, and Ms. Wingate Hernandez. Thank you all so much. I am very grateful for your expertise. Thank you all. The training is over. Bye-bye.
Judge, can we have the CLE?
Thank you for that. There is no CLE. This was your own time to develop your own expertise, given the haste that it was put together, because I want to make sure our February trial assignments have it. We don't have a CLE. So thank you for taking the time to build your expertise.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant. Thank you very much. Mr. Rodriguez, thank you. Mr. Martinez, thank you. Ms. Pearsall, thank you. Ms. Wingate Hernandez, thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge, for putting this on.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.